Hello, everyone. This is the December 18 edition of Wednesday with Walton and Newberry, coming to you here at thecardinalnation.com in video form and at the Scoops Sports Network in audio form, as well as via all your favorite podcast apps. Blake, welcome.
Thank you, Brian. Always good to be here.
So this time around, we're going to go back and revisit a topic that we first started 3 weeks ago. And what I mean is the Cardinal Nation's top 50 prospect countdown we do annually, typically through the months of November, December, into early January. And first time around, we covered about the first 15, starting at 50. And now we're going to pick up the next 20 or so from 35 to 16. But of course, in our 20 minutes here or so, we're not going to have time to talk about everybody. So we'll focus on some of the notable names, and you can read some of the articles for free at the Cardinal Nation. The other ones are for subscribers only, but there's a wealth of information about these products. Blake does a great job in the scouting reports and talking about the tools of these players. And then I provide a lot of information on their background, as well as where they stack up and where their futures might be. This is a lot of good information, and I encourage everyone to swing by the Cardinal Nation and take advantage. So we'll start at number 35 was catcher Ryan Campos. And then another catcher at 34, Raniel Rodriguez, who was very, very successful in the Dominican Summer League, but we'll wait and see how that translates to a higher level in this coming year. 33, a very interesting pitcher from Vanderbilt, Andrew Dutkanych IV, who was injured through a lot of his college career to date, but decided to come out for the draft. The Cardinals gave him a decent amount of money to sign in the seventh round. What's your take on Andrew Dutkanych, 21 years old, a good size guy?
Yeah, I like the Dutkanych pick a lot. I think it's definitely more of an upside pick. Obviously not a floor pick we're talking about a guy who threw, I think, like 17 total innings in college ball. So not a super experienced arm, had a lot of injury issues, but the stuff really pops. When you just watch him pitch an inning, when you look at the stuff measurements, the stuff is there. If he can stay healthy, it's easy to dream on him as being a guy who could potentially fill a major league rotation spot if everything breaks right, which obviously, banking on that to happen for any pitcher is a fool's errand, but he's got a fastball that's, 94, 95. It's been up to 97, 19 inches of riding life on. It's a really good pitch. Pairs up with a really nice slider and a curveball that's developing, but shows a lot of life, especially for a pitch that's so moderately hard at like 81 miles per hour. So again, it's a really nice three-pitch mix. Apparently he has a changeup in there too. Didn't really see it in this limited time, but he might have a really solid four-pitch mix there. It's just the question for him is just going to be health.
Yep, agreed. So coming through the countdown then, Ryan Lutus, reliever that folks have seen briefly with St. Louis at 32, had a nice year at Memphis. Then Luis Castellum, who we've talked about quite a bit in the past, or you've really talked about, Blake, got one pitch that is extremely exceptional, which might be his ticket to advancing to the majors.
Yeah, his changeup is probably among the best pitches in the system, might be the best pitch in the system. Just downright a filthy pitch. He uses it as his primary pitch, which you don't see often for changeups, and he still misses a ton of bats where the hitter simply cannot touch it. It's definitely a pitch that he can hopefully ride to the majors. Obviously, a lot of other things in the equation there, but it's a pitch that gives him a really good chance of continuing to rise.
So another pitcher along with Dutkanych who was drafted this year, actually the first pitcher that the Cardinals drafted in the third round. We kind of forget about the pitchers because they don't usually throw the first year as a professional. And here I'm talking about Brian Holiday from Oklahoma State. An interesting guy, but a little undersized at 5'11".
Yeah, he is. And I think what's an interesting trend of what the Cardinals maybe not looked for in the pitchers, but it could have been intentional or not. A lot of the pitchers tended to have fastballs with relatively flat, what's called vertical approach angles, which means, those are pitchers that really miss bats at the top of the zone. They come in the flat angle, hitters think they're going to drop more and they don't, and they swing underneath it. And that's really where you find bat missing fastballs, which is good in Holiday's case. A lot of times that kind of flatter angle comes from pitchers with a lower release, which is influenced by a pitcher's height. So when he's shorter, that does help him at least get that. So the fastball is not overpowering him. He's a low 90s guy, 18 inches of riding life, which likely is going to come down a little bit in pro ball. It typically does. Same could be said for Andrew Dutkanych as well. But overall, there's a lot of pitchability there. He's a really polished pitcher. Nice track record of success and of throwing strikes, and a good enough mix that, it's not going to be probably anything that blows hitters away, but it's something that could potentially live in the back end of a rotation.
Yeah, and we're talking here, of course, about Brian Holiday from Oklahoma State. Interesting in that the Cardinals drafted him in the third round. They signed him for under pool money, and Dutkanych as well as J.J. Weatherholt got some of the excess that was saved by Holiday. So, not a bad pick, but not necessarily the profile of a dominating guy necessarily in the future either.
Yeah, definitely an important caveat there with the signing bonus for sure.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's move down into the 20s. 29, Matt Koperniak, an outfielder that folks have really started to pay a lot of attention to with his success at Memphis this last year and his addition to the 40-man roster. So Koperniak will come to camp, and he'll be, on the outside fringes of trying to compete for an outfield job with St. Louis. But he's a guy that's going to get his chance now that he's on the 40-man. But next are a couple of other outfielders, both drafted in 2023. Both have been slowed by injuries at different time. Especially Travis Honeyman at number 28, third round for Boston College.
Yeah, Travis Honeyman's a guy who, like, we just need to see him on the field. I mean, the tools are there. There's a reason we have him in the top 30. There's a reason the Cardinals drafted him where they did last year. It's just he has not been on the field enough. So if he can get onto the field, we'll have a much better picture as to who he is as a prospect and what kind of tools he still possesses after a couple years of injury. But I mean, he's a guy who's a pretty aggressive swinger. He'll chase out of the zone a lot, but he makes a lot of contact. He hits a lot of line drives. Like, there's a lot to like there, and there's good athleticism in the game as well. So much so that he might be able to stick in the center field. So again, there's a lot of tools there. It's just a question of, one, can he stay healthy? And two, can he play center field? Because if he can't play center field, he could be something of a tweener who gets pushed to a corner, maybe can play an average to above average defense there, but doesn't have a ton of power, doesn't take a ton of walks. So he's not necessarily going to be a guy who's a super overpowering hitter at the plate either. So there's the potential there for him to be maybe more of like a fourth outfield type as opposed to a true starter at any position. But obviously we simply just don't know because he hasn't been on the field.
And then Zach Levenson, who came from the University of Miami. He's had the opportunity to play a bit more, but he also ended the year 2024 on the injured list at Peoria.
Yeah, and Zach Levenson's a guy I really liked his profile when the Cardinals picked him. He struggled a little bit this year. It's roughly a league average hitter at his level. But he's a guy with a lot of power, posts strong exit velocities. I mean, his exit velocities in college are actually similar to Chase Davis's, who was the first round pick for the Cardinals. So I mean, he's a guy who can mash. He's got a power hitter's kind of frame to him as well. He just, his hit tool is a little bit of a question, and not even necessarily the swing and miss, which he had like a 23% strikeout rate this year, which is a little high, but it's certainly playable and acceptable for a guy who can hit the ball as hard as he does. It's just a question of him squaring the ball up better. And I think if he can improve that, he's really going to tap into that power and start to show it in games, which is going to be the big step for him because he's a true corner outfielder and his bat is going to have to carry him. So that hit tool is going to have to come around a little bit for him to keep progressing here.
And of course, Blake's talking about Zach Levenson, who, as well as Travis Honeyman, the player he talked about before, those two outfielders are likely be back at Peoria to start 2025. At least that's what we would expect.
Agreed.
Okay, 26, left-hander Ixan Henderson. Saw him in the Arizona Fall League, but did a nice job with Palm Beach and then Peoria. This is another player that you think has some pretty good potential, right?
Yeah, I like Ixan Henderson a lot. I mean, he's kind of a little bit of a deceptive lefty, but he's got a deep arsenal. I mean, solid fastball, again, not going to be a dominant fastball, but it's one with a decent amount of induced vertical break, got some riding life to it, got some good arm side life to it as well. Also a four-seamer and a sinker and mix both in, depending on the handedness of the hitter. But then he also has a really nice looking slider and a really nice looking curveball. The only difference is his arm slot kind of separates a little bit on those two pitches. It actually did look like he did a better job in the fall league of bringing those two release points a little bit closer together, which is good. So he's not going to tip the hitter off either way. But slider's got, in both actually the slider and the curveball have a lot of glove side life to it. Curveball's got good depth. It's a little bit on the slower side, but he's done a good job of attacking hitters pretty well. And again, I mean, he mixes in like 6 pitches and he's able to throw all of them effectively. And all of them aren't like dominating pitches, but they're probably right around like the 45 to 55 grade window. So they're all roughly average and he mixes them effectively and has weapons that he can use to attack both lefties and righties. So he's a guy who looks like he could be, a potential kind of back end starter, maybe like a swing man or a little bit of a relief profile where the stuff picks up a little bit as well.
And that was Ixan Henderson. At 25, middle infielder Jonathan Mejia. That's a free article, so you can read about that. He spent the year at AA Springfield. Number 24, Gerardo Salas, also known as Juan Salas to some, but he goes by his middle name, Gerardo. Salas might have only been the third or fourth best pitcher on that loaded Palm Beach rotation, but 2.62 ERA at Palm Beach as a starter, 331 FIP. led the Cardinals system with his 4.8 to 1 strikeout to walk ratio. And he's led the system in 2 of his 3 years. So this is a guy that has a decent strikeout rate, but also just doesn't walk anybody.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's the thing I really like about Gerardo Salas is the control is it's really, really good for a young pitcher, but he also has a fastball that the rest of his arsenal can play off of. It's relatively, decent vertical attack approach angle. It really comes in at the top of the zone. He likes to throw it at the top of the zone. And it's got a good movement profile, getting like 18, 19 inches of riding life on it. So it's a pitch that is really a playable fastball and probably even an above average fastball. And that's good. And I think the thing about Salas that really impresses me the most is while the control is good and his ability to limit walks is good, his command is also good. He has a curveball and a slider, neither of which are exceptional pitches from a pure movement standpoint, but he does an amazing job of burying his curveball at hitters' knees or below, and the pitch is really, really effective when he locates it there. Because of the lack of quality and how it can get a little bit loopy when it's thrown up in the zone, it'll get hit around a little bit if it's in the top third and middle third of the zone, but he does a good job of keeping it out of there. I think, in fact, almost like 65% of his curveballs are thrown to the lower third or below, which is exactly what you want to see from a pitcher like him. And he does the same thing with his slider, and when he does that, the slider is like a 45% whiff rate kind of pitch. So he's a guy who really knows how to pitch and is really able to execute his plan of attack because he's able to command the ball so well, and then has a good fastball to round it out. So there's certainly a lot to like there.
Yep. And so now we're on the edge of the top 20. 23 is Matt Swanson, who of course was 27 to 27 with saves at Springfield, then went down to the Fall League and received a 40-man roster spot. 22 is open because Adam Kloffenstein was non-tendered, so that spot we're going to hold until we see some action here from the Cardinals, maybe in trades in this offseason. 21, Cesar Prieto. Prieto came over in a trade. He's a middle infielder, really second base, third base. Came over from Baltimore in the Jack Flaherty trade last year at the same time as Thomas Saggese, and there was looking at those two guys trying to decide, okay, who's going to jump ahead. Saggese clearly has. Prieto's played some second base, third base, is a good contact guy, but doesn't walk, doesn't strike out, and his power is kind of emerging, but he's still, Cesar Prieto I'm talking about, is still relatively young and, could force his way into the picture down the road. The downside is, he's a left-handed hitter who is primarily a second baseman and plays a little third.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. It's, he doesn't have enough of a bat to probably carry him into a regular role, but he's a pesky hitter who doesn't strike out. He'll make a ton of contact. As a lefty, you can put him into righty spots. Obviously, there's a lot of competition for left-handed bats anywhere in the Cardinals roster, honestly. But there's enough in there to think that he could be a really serviceable role player, a guy who can play second and third. And you're right, the power did start to show up a little bit more this year. He's never going to be a big power guy, but his exit velocities were a little bit better this year. He was able to get into his powers, particularly to the pull side, and get 14 home runs. So I don't imagine he's ever going to clear like 15, even at the major league level, but there's a little bit of juice there. And he's just a really, really solid overall hitter. If he could just learn how to control himself outside of the strike zone a little bit and take some more walks, he'd be that much more effective, and that would really boost his profile as a whole.
And Prieto is just 21 years old, a former Cuban. The good news in his case is the Cardinals have another year before he's Rule 5 eligible, and he's already got 1 year at AAA Memphis. So, we'll see what happens with Prieto in 2025. The Cardinals aren't, under pressure to do anything with him right away other than play him regularly. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like he has what it takes to play shortstop, which would give him a leg up. But a guy who can play second and third, can be a value as well.
Yeah, especially if the Cardinals are going to trade Nolan Arenado this offseason too and move Nolan Gorman to third base, which kind of sounds like the plan. It at least pulls one more infielder out of the picture and potentially could open the spot for Prieto down the road if an injury happens.
That's right. Number 20, which you can read about free, catcher Sammy Hernandez, a guy that I've liked for some time, and he's really vaulted up our ranking just inside the top 20. The pitcher of the year in 2023 in the system, Max Radjic, didn't have as good of a year as he did in 2023 and 2024 when he was at Springfield, but continued to improve through the year and is still a guy to remember. But where I wanted to have you talk next is about number 18, Darlin Saladin, who was exceptional at Palm Beach, even though he got promoted with a couple months in the season, was recognized as an all-star in the Florida State League. And Saladin continued to go after hitters and do exceptionally well in the Midwest League as well.
Yeah, and Saladin's another one of those really young, really good like Palm Beach pitchers that the Cardinals had in the system. Obviously, I think he ended the year in Peoria, but he's a guy who you really look at it. It's a plus fastball. That's really what carries his profile, and he's another one of those kind of flatter angled fastball guys, which means he's going to miss bats at the top of the zone, and he knows that. So he throws over 70% of his pitches in the upper third of the zone or above, and his fastball just by itself had a 33% whiff rate over last year when he was in single A. When he threw it in the upper third of the zone or higher, that went to above 40%. So, I mean, and that's just a fastball. That's a big bat missing fastball. And the numbers and the pitch shape metrics behind it really back up the overall quality of the pitch. So, definitely a pitch that he can really, really lean on. And that really opens up the rest of his arsenal, which admittedly isn't that good. He has a slider and a changeup. Slider's probably a 50 grade slider, and changeup looking a little bit below average, could potentially tick into average. But he again, when he really is elevating that fastball and keeping the hitter's eye level up, all he needs is to locate a slider well at the bottom of the zone, and just the natural movement and bat missing abilities of a slider is really going to just allow him to have a playable second and third pitch. So obviously he's going to need some improvements there, but I'm always willing to bet on a pitcher, especially a young pitcher with a plus fastball, because it's generally easier to improve secondary pitches like sliders and changeups and curveballs with different tweaks to the grip than it is to actually improve the quality of a fastball outside of adding velocity. So he's definitely a pitcher with a lot to like and just still a lot more development ahead of him.
And that's number 18, Darlin Saladin. A teammate of Saladin's at the end of the year, last guy we're probably going to have time to talk about today, Won-Bin Cho, one of the two top 20 players coming up in our countdown from Asia. Came into the system with a lot of excitement, still been very, very young. Did not have the kind of year at Peoria that he would have liked or anyone would have liked, either in average or power, but you're still very bullish on him, aren't you?
Yeah, I think with Cho right now, with how young he is, I'm willing to give him a little bit of a boost just because of the raw tools that he's shown. Now, obviously, as he matures, we're going to have to start seeing those tools become production. And, he did not have a great year this year. I think he's likely going to repeat the level next year. And if he struggles again next year, I'm willing to have a real conversation about sliding him pretty far down the rankings. But we're looking at a guy who didn't really show hit tool question marks to this level until this year. He obviously had a little bit of a ground ball issue last year, still had some of that this year, but the swing and miss really came into his game this year, which is a concern. I think he does have a somewhat of a complicated swing, so there is some potential for him to shorten it up or just become more comfortable with it as he matures. But again, this is a guy who had a 111 mile per hour batted ball as a 19-year-old. That is with a wood bat, like that's a lot of power potential for somebody who's going to continue to grow and mature into his frame and become a better and stronger hitter. So again, there's a lot of tools, strong arm. He's a guy who has played center field, although probably fits more into right field long term, but still a good athlete out there and can play at least average, maybe above average defense in the corner with power projection and hit tool questions that weren't as big of question marks in the past. So still a lot to like here from just a general overall prospect pedigree. It's just now he's going to have to really, work on some of the weaknesses that he showed this year and come back looking stronger and more ready for the level that he's playing at next year.
So here tonight, we probably outlined the starting outfield for Peoria next year in Honeyman, Levenson, and Cho. Likely they'll all be back there at least to start the year. But the Cardinals have shown they're willing to promote guys in season if they prove they're ready.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we'll see what happens. I think all three of those guys have a lot of promise, and I mean, we put them, we've ranked them accordingly in the rankings. But I think it'll be interesting to see how much center field Won-Bin Cho plays next year, if that is what the starting outfield is, because I would imagine Honeyman gets the regular center field assignment with Levenson probably in left and Cho in right. But I do think that Cho has the athleticism to think that maybe there's a chance that him and Honeyman kind of flip flop in center field and right field and then kind of play every other day or every other series and at each position.
All right. Well, with that, we will conclude the December 18th edition of Wednesday with Walton and Newberry. As I said, our countdown is occurring at the rate of one prospect announced per day. And if you go to our website, you can see the master article that shows the list of prospects, the schedule, the guys who have already been unveiled, as well as what is yet to come in the series. So for next week, of course, next Wednesday will be Christmas. We're hoping to get a podcast in before that. And we want to wish everybody a happy holiday season as well.
Yeah, thank you for listening to all of these, and I hope the year ends well, and enjoy your Christmas and spend time with family, hopefully, and not too much time listening to us talking about minor league prospects on Wednesday.
There you go. Just 20 minutes or so. That's all we ask.
That's right.
Thanks, everybody. Talk to you next time.